everyone. Welcome back to our Time to Thrive podcast. I'm Dr. Krista, your host. And on this podcast, we talk about all things holistic medicine, all sorts of tips and tricks. And today we have an exciting guest, someone who practices very similarly and has an awesome mindset. She lifts everyone up around her. But she also is trained in a lot of different things. She's a physical therapist. She's done pelvic floor therapy. She's trained in
Mhm,
nutrition, also in
mhm,
functional medicine. So
mhm.
let's welcome Dr. Nancy Beliveau to our podcast today. Welcome, Nancy. So great to have you today.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Krista.
So let's dive in. Let's talk about your story. What got you interested in holistic medicine and physical therapy? What's the lowdown?
So I remember when I was little, my dad asked what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I said an artist or maybe a dancer. And then he was like, "Well, is there anything else you want to be?" Because my dad was a businessman. And then I was like, "Well, I like science." He's like, "Great, you should be a doctor." So initially, I was studying under my uncle, who was an internist, and I was pre-medicine at Villanova. And then I just felt like in my clinical experience, I was just pushing medications and I didn't feel like I was promoting health. I felt like I was just managing sickness. So I had had my own health issues, lots of hormone problems. I was just given birth control as a teenager, weight issues. I was brought to a nutritionist, but still had weight issues and was always bloated. And she just told me to still eat everything. And I just felt and looked pregnant all the time. And then it stemmed into here's laxatives, right? And then before I knew it, I was on like multiple medications by the time I was 21. And I felt like at the end of the day, I just kept getting sicker and no answers. And I knew something was wrong, but it just kept being told to me that everything looks great on my lab work. So I discovered a naturopath and he really changed my life. He helped me figure out how to get rid of my gut issues, which helped my eczema that was all over my body, helped my hormone issues. I was able to get off my medications. And I was like, this is what I want to do. But I never really had the resources to go to naturopathy school. I wasn't directed that way. So I was directed to physical therapy because it was a type of doctor that promoted exercise. So I was like, all right, that's good. And then from there, when I graduated, I started studying nutrition, integrative medicine, and functional medicine. And here we are.
Here you are, and making so many impacts on people's lives, changing lives every single day, which is so
Mhm.
amazing. So diving into just the physical therapy part, because I know there's so many people out there who,
Mhm.
are suffering from sciatica or just injuries
Mhm.
that aren't healing. Um,
Mhm.
what would you recommend in terms of like seeking out a physical therapist? Why is it
Mhm.
important to do that?
Mhm.
How can they find a physical therapist? Things like that.
Yeah. So the thing that's great about physical therapists is most of them are now doctors of physical therapy. So, like primary care doctors, you typically do not need a script to see a physical therapist. They're considered a primary care provider. What that means is that you can typically look for a physical therapist near you. And what you really want to look for is that they're not like an assembly line. You might want to call and ask, like, how many patients do you guys book per hour? Because I've worked in practices where you're seeing, 4 to 6 or more patients an hour, and you're getting less than 5 minutes per patient. And that's still like a sick care model. I would say, though, that physical therapy would be great to seek out and look for a place that maybe sees like 1 or 2 patients an hour, and it could be hard through in-network insurance to do that. You might need to go out of network or pay, but in the end, you're gonna get better faster and pay a lot less in the long run because you're like, oh, it's only $20 every time, and then like you end up going for like months on end. But I would say that it would be great, to go there first when you have a stiffness, ache, pain, something, pinching, because if you go to a physician, if the only real tool they have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And if you're looking for a medication or an injection or a surgery, you go to a physician. But if you want to get better with massage and stretching, which would be no side effects, I mean, warning, you might be relaxed. versus like all these deleterious side effects. I would absolutely recommend it as the first line of defense with an ache or a pain.
Yeah, super important to just really
Yeah.
have someone to guide you through a particular plan for you, whether that involves
Hmm.
exercising or stretching
Hmm.
or just working on
Hmm.
inflammation in general. Are there things you
Yeah.
generally recommend
Hmm.
for inflammatory processes, how to help with that?
Yeah. So like instead of taking Advil like candy, I used to do that in case anyone does. No judging. I just was told, oh, you have a headache? Take a Tylenol, take an Advil, take an Aleve. And I had it in every purse and every car and every backpack and like everywhere. I would say that that does tax the liver. It can also contribute to leaky gut. And instead, you can consider things like turmeric and omega-3. So typically around 1,000 milligrams of turmeric and 2,000 milligrams of omega-3 is comparable to an NSAID. An NSAID would be like the Aleve type medications over the counter. And I would say, while there's exceptions to why you might not want to do that instead, we would have to say like it depends on your case, check with your provider, but typically it's totally safe. And I honestly will pop a turmeric and or omega-3 instead of popping those things. I can't even remember the last time. I think it was after I delivered my son. I think I took an ibuprofen like once or twice because if you've had a child, you understand. But other than something like that, it would be a much better alternative. And then if you need something stronger, something like CBD is a great option. I really like organic woven earth. They're really good because it's organic, it's like cold pressed. I don't work for them or endorse them. I just really like that brand because there's so many CBDs out there, and that one I find is really clean.
That's amazing. Great tips right there
Yeah.
for people to
Hmm.
try out. And you
Hmm.
mentioned leaky gut. Can you just explain
Hmm.
that for people who don't know what that is?
Yeah. So the best thing to envision is a sausage before you put it on the grill. If you put it on the grill and under heat or stress, it'll like bust open, right? That sausage goes from like this uniform looking tubular thing, and then you put it on the grill and juices come out, and then it can like crack open. And that's actually sheep intestine that's coating that sausage. And that's actually how thin our gut is. That's how paper thin our gut is. So under stress, whether it's physical, emotional, or chemical stress, that can cause our gut to be leaky. And then what happens is things that are not supposed to leak out leak into the bloodstream, and then our immune system freaks out and starts attacking those things. So then that can cause things like autoimmune conditions. It can also contribute to fatigue, osteopenia, because you're not even absorbing nutrients. It could cause like body aches and trouble sleeping as a dysbiosis that can keep you awake at night. It's quite a problem that's linked to probably almost every health condition, leaky gut.
So if someone is, popping their NSAIDs, taking them for
Hmm.
pain, could they actually be making themselves worse?
Yeah, because a lot of people take them and they're like, "Oh, I'm not on any medications," like, and then they just only take that like often, and that can cause leaky gut, which can therefore make the immune system go awry. And when the immune system is awry, cytokines are released, which is inflammatory pain. So it's almost like, okay, so you swallow this NSAID now, but then the aftermath of that is that there's potentially more pain or inflammation later. And these drug companies, even if it's over the counter, I mean, they're the ones really benefiting because then you just need more and more, anti-inflammatory. So like eating healthful whole foods because chemicals in processed foods can cause leaky gut, making sure you're doing breath work, meditation, things that help cope with stress, and really trying to avoid those NSAIDs would be the best option whenever possible.
Awesome. I love it.
Mm.
Let's
Yeah,
let's dive into those things. Let's talk
sure.
about nutrition first, and then we'll talk
Yeah.
about breath work. So
Hmm.
you've done a lot of work with nutrition. You were coaching in this for a long time, and
Yeah.
you do it every day now too. So for our audience, are there specific things that you like to recommend often or ways they can decrease inflammation based on their food?
Yes. So the first one that in our practice we typically start with is sugar. So when someone's consuming more sugar than they need to, this can increase inflammation several fold. What that means is that people think like, oh, I'm just eating fruit or honey, or it's coconut sugar. I mean, that still counts as sugar. So it's not that those things are bad, but I would even limit those things, like maybe one or two pieces of fruit a day, or a teaspoon of honey once a day. I mean, really, we try to aim for under 25 grams of sugar from like all sources in the day. If that's too hard for you, then, figure out how much sugar you are eating and just each week cut back, by 5 or 10 grams. The next thing that we notice is gluten. Even if you're not celiac, I've noticed people have more brain fog, more joint pain. I know personally, if I eat gluten, like my back and my joints will just hurt, my knees. And then there's people who will avoid it, and they'll not only feel less bloated, have less leaky gut, but they'll also feel more energy and just less body aches and stiffness and pain. Another big one that can be inflammatory for some people is, it depends on your source, of course, but cow dairy, there's raw organic milks. Those are in a different category. But if you're just having like Velveeta, for example, or just foods that are processed, honestly, it's like these artificial chemicals are a stressor, and our body's immune system recognizes they're not supposed to be there. And when we ignite our immune system, people think it's just when we get sick, but actually it can create, once again, that cytokine storm, which is like all these immune cells that basically give you the aches, the pains, the fatigue that you feel when you get sick. So I would say those are some top things we recommend avoiding. Artificial colors, flavors, dyes, watch that gluten, try to avoid that, and like traditional cow dairy and sugar are the top things we look at.
Anything that you would have people add in dietary?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say if you could add in things like, I love flax oil. That's a natural source of omega-3, super anti-inflammatory, and for women and men, a source of phytoestrogens, and estrogens help us with flexibility. So I love flax oil. I love fresh turmeric. I love to grind it and like put it in a smoothie or grate it over, pasture raised eggs. I also love leafy greens. I know like everyone has a different take on that depending on your situation. It depends on what helps, but typically vegetables and the rainbow are anti-inflammatory. I would also say like organic and pasture raised protein sources and wild protein sources are great, because this will facilitate the liver's detoxification pathways when you have readily available amino acids. And what that means is that things like heavy metals, pesticides can build up in the liver. And when the liver starts to dump because it wants to get rid of these things, that can cause inflammation. So I really like those as like the basis of the diet, like healthy fats, vegetables, and protein. If you are going to eat carbs, I do promote more so root vegetables over grains. And I said grains, grains, not greens there, because a lot of grains, even if they're organic, can have residues of pesticides or arsenic, which are things that are going to bother the central nervous system. So linked to things like MS, Parkinson's, or just like migraines and inflammation in general, like hyperactive nerve endings. So I hope that helps.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm,
definitely a lot of good suggestions in there. And
mhm,
I know
mhm.
you mentioned, getting your healthy proteins in there. You have
Yeah.
experience on both sides, eating meat and not eating meat.
Yeah.
For people who don't eat meat, do you have suggestions for
Yeah.
them, or what are your ideas between the
Yeah.
two?
Yeah, Dr. Krista, that I was plant-based, vegan, vegetarian, various forms of those for like 20 years, actually, probably from when I was about 14 until, I'm 38 now, like last year, really. And I would say like if you're more plant-based, great sources of protein. You could do nuts and seeds. I do love hemp protein, making sure you have like one smoothie a day that has like a good at least 10, preferably 20 grams of protein. And the reason why is it's very bioavailable, meaning when it's blended in a blended form, it's like so easy for your body to use it. And that'll help with like chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia, as well as with detoxification. So I hope that helps. I heard there's something called hemp tofu. It sounds good in theory. I haven't tried it, but like I'm not a big fan of soy. That can be very mucus forming and inflammatory. And even if it's like organic and non GMO, the protein in soy can still trigger an immune response if it's organic, non GMO, or if it's regular soy. So some people, I tell them, still try to avoid too much soy as well.
Yeah, hemp tofu. I haven't come across that either, but we're gonna have to scout it out now. We can do a little taste
Yeah.
test, right?
Yeah.
See how it goes. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. So we've got some good protein options. You
Mhm.
also just mentioned something important that we should talk about too, which is detoxification. So can
Yeah.
you talk about why that's important?
Yeah, I would say that's important because it's kind of like cleaning your house. Whenever I tell my patients like, "Oh, do I have to detox or I can't do that or it's not safe?" I'm like, "Okay, if you have the right person guiding you and you're doing it gently, it's critical." Imagine if you just lived in your house and didn't clean it. And you're like, "Oh yeah, well I clean it," or the cleaning lady comes. Yeah, but like you have to pull out the couch and vacuum behind it. Like dust is going to get there. Or same thing with your closet. Like can you imagine if 20 years went by and I didn't donate any clothes and didn't buy any new clothes? I mean, that's just kind of or if I kept buying new clothes but like didn't actually donate any. That's actually a better example. Because what happens is our world is so toxic with even if you like live in a bubble and you stay home and you have this organic garden, there's chemtrails, there's water pollution. I mean, it's just even if you grow everything yourself and have filters everywhere, it's almost like trying to avoid dirt from getting in your house, even if you're a clean freak. Like it's going to happen. So I would say I tell people to detox at least once a year, if not once a season. If you want, even once or twice a week. Now, when I say detox, you should definitely work with a skilled provider, like Dr. Krista, for example, because we need to customize it to you. One person's detox was literally just cutting back on soda. That was it. Another person's detox was cutting back on cigarettes. And then I have people that are doing, a 24-hour water fast with me because they're at that level where that would be the appropriate level of detox, right? Is that what I put everyone on? No, most people are not doing like a juice water fast or a carnivore diet. Are those things that some people could do? Absolutely. It depends on like where you're at, right? If you're a couch potato, don't just try to run a marathon tomorrow, right? But if you're already running marathons, let's do an ultra. So we just kind of need to have a skilled provider assess where you are and then also know where to detox. The best example I can give, I know Krista, you're a boy mom like me, is one time I asked little Mikey, my little boy, to help mama clean the house. And then I couldn't find him. And all my patients know this story. I do this at my seminars. I tell my patients this every day. And they're like, oh man, that little punk, that little bugger, where is he? No, no, no. He was actually helping, but he was cleaning the bathroom and he had the toilet bowl brush in the toilet, waving in the air, wet toilet water on him, toilet paper that's wet all over the floor. But the bathroom was clean before he went in. Now he and the bathroom were very dirty. And people were coming over in an hour. So I needed his help to help me clean up because daddy was golfing. So I use that example because sometimes we try to detox, but we don't know where we need to detox. And if you have a skilled provider to help you figure out, like, is it heavy metals? Is it my hormones? Is it my gut? Is it something else? You know what part of the house has to be cleaned. And the only part that needed to be cleaned was the dishes. So then Michael takes the toilet bowl brush and tries to clean the dishes with it. And I'm like, no, baby, now the dishes are dirtier. So, like, unless you really know where to go and how to go there the right way, then we can kind of be like making ourselves worse or kind of feel like we're just drawing at straws and not getting anything.
Totally. Yeah, detox is one of
Yeah.
those things that you really need that mentor, that guide, because a lot of people can actually
Mhm.
make themselves worse. Like there's detox
Right.
reactions that can happen if you haven't
Yeah.
healed your gut, like you talked about earlier.
Yeah.
All of those
Hmm.
things can contribute. So super important to be doing
Yeah.
some sort of detox, but also in the right way for you, like Dr. Nancy mentioned.
Yeah. I'm sure you've seen Herxing reactions, right? Those like where you
Yeah.
get worse, the Herxheimer reactions. Those are like the worst for patients because they feel like I might as well just give up or, maybe I should push through this, but it can be quite dangerous. My body was covered in hives when I detoxed without guidance and it just detoxed too quickly. I mean, I couldn't even function, couldn't go to work. My whole body was like covered in red hives. So it was really important that your pathways are open and you have someone that knows what they're doing, walk you through that.
Yeah. So let's dive into the breath work piece.
Yeah.
Why is it helpful to breathe? And what are some good tips and tricks on breath work?
Yeah. So sharing a personal story might help. I don't really find myself very bloated much anymore because I've really done so much work on that. I mean, I used to just literally look pregnant, but I was recently, even though I've done pelvic PT earlier in my career, I was recently going for it myself because it's sometimes hard to like do manual therapy on yourself to like massage your own back or align your own spine. It's kind of hard to do that. And the first thing that they had me do was breath work. And I'm like, oh, yeah. I know I should do this, right? Oh, I do it. Yeah. They're like, no, I want you to do it like every hour or at least 3 times a day, the boxed breath, where you inhale for 4 counts slowly, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and then hold for 4 seconds, right? So I started doing this like every hour. I have a sticky note on my desk. You can see it here. It says breathe, right? Literally, it's on my kitchen, my bathroom. I have it everywhere so that I remember it. It goes off on my phone. And I did this for a month. And while my bloating's gone away, I'm like, holy crud, look at my abs. Like my bloating was just gone even more. And I didn't even think I was bloated at all. And I just felt so much calmer. Now, the reason why this is important is it's not just for your pelvic health, whether you're a man or a woman, and for continence and incontinence and pain and intimacy, making sure you don't have any issues there. The breath work, it really engages the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's where we're going to reduce cortisol. And so many times I see men and women with either elevated cortisol or burnout, which means their cortisol has been so high for so long that they just like literally are like they're like flatlining, almost like when an EKG flatlines and someone's dead, like your cortisol is flatlining, you're not really doing so hot. Okay, it's just burnout. You're just tired all the time, aches and pains. So I would say breath work is really important to engage the parasympathetic, which is the rest, repair, digest nervous system. It'll help combat leaky gut, reduce cortisol, which helps with belly fat reduction, and it just honestly, I think helps you to have a happier life, right? So much of life is not what happens to us, but it's how we respond. And if we could at least respond in a positive way by doing that breath work, I think that would help us to like just live a happier life and make a happier world. So I'm a big fan of breath work.
Yeah, I like that story too about the bloating, because I think a lot of people
Mhm.
don't connect these things. Like, oh, if I
Mhm.
breathe, maybe my bloating will go down, or maybe my
Right.
constipation will get better. We had a patient similarly, did
Yeah.
all the things, and
Yeah.
then we taught her how to breathe, and all of a sudden
Yeah.
she could go to the bathroom, right? So
Totally.
really amazing what can change with your breath. It's just
Yeah.
about focusing on it and remembering to do it every hour, right?
Yeah.
I love your little note, your breathe notes, and you're really good about this. You know, I've been in your home and you have all sorts of affirmations and other things
Mhm.
surrounding your environment. So can you
Yeah.
talk about that too? Why that's
Yeah.
helpful for people?
Yeah, I think it's helpful to first know that like I'm not positive all the time and I'm not perfect all the time, and that it's okay to experience first and foremost sadness and anger and grief. It's like, how long though do we let ourselves dwell there? And I think that at the end of the day, like it's okay. I've learned as an optimist and this like person who just is always moving forward, that it's okay to feel it, feel it, get a cry out, whatever it is, right? But then redirect that, reframe that. Like, okay, what can I learn from this? Right? Because we either win or we learn. And so when something, quote, bad happens, right, we really can't connect the dots looking forward. Steve Jobs always says we can only look back and then it makes sense. So, like, if you could try to reframe it, right, which means, okay, this completely sucks. Like, this is the worst thing ever. This is never going to change. Like, that's not really going to help you or anyone around you because your negative mood impacts your significant other, your kids, your family, your work, whatever it may be. So I would say like journal it out. I love to write down. I learned this trick where like each morning our brain wakes up and our brain is programmed to what can harm me the second we wake up. And then all day long, just like tribal beings in the wilderness with panthers and cheetahs and bears, it's like, what can harm me? That's actually our automatic state that our brain's in. So if we can recognize that and not try to suppress it, each morning I wake up. And of course, it's just like everyone else. When I first wake up, my brain's like, oh, what was I worried about? Right? Or what can harm me? It goes there. So I'll write it down. As soon as I wake up, I have a notebook right next to my bed, but I also have it right in the family room. And I just write down what's bothering me, how I'm feeling, and then I journal it out. I'm all like, even if it's one sentence, sometimes it's a page. And then I'll either tear it up or I'll burn it in a little jar. And then I'm like, oh, I feel like such a relief. So it's not just about being positive, it's actually about emptying out the negative first, right? Because your house is clean if you clean it, but sometimes you just need to take the trash out. Okay. And then I would say, like, around your house, right? Like, I have an I am coaster. Like, after you clean out, take out the garbage, right? Clean out the negative. Then you can refill yourself and fill yourself big enough that you're like overflowing to others, because that makes you feel good to refill yourself with, I am calm. I am peaceful. I used to have anxiety and panic attacks in high school. And when you're like, I'm so stressed about this, I'm so nervous, then what if this happens? And what if that happens? Then this. And you just create a snowball that keeps getting bigger. Okay. Instead, you can write down what you're feeling. And when you write it down, or if you want to get a therapist and talk it out, right? Or a trusted friend, once you write it down, you look at it, you're like, this is completely ridiculous. This is probably never going to happen. Right. Or you say it out loud, you're like, wow, that's ridiculous. Right. And then you can refill with, I am calm. I am peaceful. So I found that that really, really helps doing breath work, like a few deep breaths, and then reframing to just empty the negative and then refill with, like, I am peaceful. I trust, right? I trust that God, universe, higher power, source, something that I'm not, has a higher intelligence, a higher control, and that in the end, I can't see it now. But like a child that's like kicking that they won't get a lollipop before dinner, right? I can't see it now. I want my way, but something and someone knows better than me. And I trust it'll all work out. And it always has. Looking back to things that have worked out that you thought wouldn't can help remind you, like, this too will work out. So all around my house, I have quotes and things that remind me just of the truth, because there's enough negativity that already is pushed on us.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
even while you're detoxing internally, you also need to detox that outward environment, whether it be your own
absolutely.
thoughts or people or
Yeah.
whatever, because all of
Mhm.
these things also
Yeah.
contribute to inflammation and potentially pain and all of these
Right.
diseases that we're prone to. So listen to
Absolutely.
Dr. Nancy on all these things,
Yeah.
because this is important stuff. I know it might
Yeah.
seem quote unquote simple,
Hmm.
but if
Hmm.
you're doing all of these things, then you can really make a huge difference in
Yeah.
your outlook, your mind,
Hmm.
but also
Hmm.
your physical being and your
Hmm.
spirituality. It's all connected.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Dr. Nancy is such a great example, because I kid you not,
Hmm.
she's doing these things every day. I see it. I see her doing that. So if someone wants to reach out to you to learn more, to follow you, where can
Yeah.
they do that?
Sure. So you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram, Holistic Wholeness Institute. And holistic is spelt, as you probably imagine, holistic, but wholeness gets people sometimes. WHOLENESS, Holistic Wholeness Institute. And then you can go to our website, holisticwholeness.institute.com. And we do all sorts of different events, whether it's in person or webinars, masterclass. And there's tips each day on our social channels. So you can tune into us there as well. Mhm.
Okay, so last question to end this with.
Yeah.
If you could create a big mural on the side of a wall and it had
Hmm.
a message in it to the world,
Yeah. Hmm.
what would you put in that message? It's a tough
I would.
question.
It is. I'm gonna be a copycat, and I'm gonna put Gandhi of "Be the change that you wish to see in the world," because I think that it can be overwhelming where to start. But if everyone just does a little bit for yourself, it creates a ripple effect that creates a more positive world in every sense of the word. So be the change that you wish to see in the world would be my pick.
I love it. And she's doing that, guys. So I hope that you learn from her today and start doing some of these things, right? We're
Mhm.
all about taking action. So
Yeah.
important for you to not only hear these things, but then put them
Mhm.
into practice, because that's what's
Yeah.
going to make the difference. So
Thank
thank
you.
you so much, Dr. Nancy, for imparting your wisdom on us and our listeners. And we hope to have you back sometime soon.
Thank you.
For all of you who want to learn more, definitely check out her site. She has so much great content on there.
Mhm.
And in the meantime, everyone, keep thriving.
Mhm.